So 4-5, here we go. There's 4 words to teach you about in 4-5. This ties into a conversation we had the very first day of chapter 4 when we solved these systems for the first time. Does anybody remember what we did the first day of solving systems? It's a way we've avoided like the plague ever since. Graphing. So if I give you an equation like this, and you graph it, it's going to make a line. Then I give you another equation like that, which would make a line. The first day we talked about 3 scenarios that could pop up, 2 of which have not popped up yet until today. When you did your graph work on that homework, how did the 2 lines go on that homework day when we graphed and on the test when we graphed? They crossed. They made an X. And the answer was found as the point where they crossed. Every assignment since then, the lines have always made an X. But the first day we talked about something else could happen other than the lines making an X, even though it hasn't happened to us yet. How else could the lines go other than making an X? Yeah, they could like stack on top of each other. Okay, if they stacked on top of each other, then is there an answer?
All of the lines?
Yeah, the entire line. There's not just one answer, there's an infinite amount of answers. Okay, we have a word for that. Okay, so the word for that today is dependent. If you ever have a setup where you get the same equation twice, if the setup is that if we graphed them, they'd stack on top of each other, that is called a dependent system. That's a word of the day that we have to just absorb by the time there's a quiz. What's another scenario? Other than the X, other than they stacked, what's another thing that we could have happen? They could be parallel lines. So if you got parallel lines, they're never going to touch. So what's the solution to that?
Nothing.
There is no solution. There is no answer. The word for that is going to be inconsistent. If you get parallel lines, there is no solution. That's called an inconsistent system. So we're going to have 2 decisions to make in the homework. Every system is either going to be consistent because it has a solution, at least one solution. Even the ones where they stacked and you have infinite solutions, that's still consistent. There's still solutions there. There's lots of solutions there, in fact. But if we have a solution, that's called consistent. If we have no solution because it's some kind of nonsense problem or parallel lines, that's going to be called an inconsistent system. Up to this point of the chapter, what has every system we've encountered been? Everything's been consistent or everything's been inconsistent? Everything's been consistent. Which, if you want to try to think it through, that's like the better word. Okay? Whether it's math, basketball, human behaviors, whatever it might be, are you better as a human to be consistent or to be inconsistent? I think you're better to be consistent in most things, unless it's a bad thing we're talking about. But anything good about you, you'd like to be consistent with it. So consistent is kind of like a good news word. It's what you want it to do. Inconsistent means, something weird happened here. This isn't maybe what we wanted. And the same holds true for this. Would you rather be dependent or would you rather be independent as a human being? You'd rather be independent. Independent means you can do stuff on your own. Dependent means you're like a little baby. Independent is like a strong word. Everything we've seen up to this point in our chapter has been independent systems. We've never encountered, until in a minute we will, any dependent system. Question about meaning of the words? I have a paper where I have like that written down, so if you're writing it down, great. If you want my paper in case you lose what you wrote down, that's great. I could give you these papers. But my advice for strategy on making these choices is, if it's just an XY system, get the equations all y equals. What form is that when they're y equals? Slope-intercept form. How does that connect to the idea of being parallel? What was the rule on parallel when we did parallel in chapter 3? They have the same slope and different intercepts. So being in slope-intercept form is a good invitation. If it's an XY system, we're going to get it y equals, and then we'll decide. So that's what we're going to do in a minute over there. If it's an XYZ system, I'd suggest trying to solve it like you're going to do the take-home, or like you did page 174. We'll get to those on this side of me, and then just kind of see what happens. Okay, but that's the name of the game. Sometimes people have trouble with this. I think it's because there's two layers to it. Okay, layer one is do the math, and then layer two is remember what word means what scenario, and that it maybe takes some practice or some study to like get those to fit. Questions about the scheme? So let me stroll leftward. Instead of writing the equations here as a stacked system of two like I've usually been doing, I just put them side by side because I need work to get these changed. Because what did I say I want to do with the XY systems? Get it y equals. So this one, I'd leave the negative y alone. I'd leave the 2 alone. What's going to happen to shift the 3x out of there? We go minus 3x. For this to go completely, y equals. Flip the signs. So negative 2 plus 3x. So that's like equation number 1, I got it y equals. Question about that. So let's do the other one. This one, I'd leave the negative 2y, leave the equals, leave the 3, and then the 6x. I need to subtract 6x to get the y alone. Negative 3 over 2 plus 3x. That's most of the work. That's familiar work, but that's going to be most of your work is just the work at getting these y equals so we can accurately decide. Question about the y equals like? Let's do the dependent independent question first because that's easier. Okay, if those are the same, it's dependent. If those are different in any way, that's independent. So are these dependent or independent? Those are independent because they are different. Who's different?
The negative 2 and
The negative 2 versus the fraction. So those are different. So this is an independent system.
But it's parallel.
But they're parallel lines. Okay, we know they're parallel lines because the slopes, which are always with the x, are the same. But those numbers are different, so those lines are parallel, so this would be inconsistent. And that's our pair of answers for this. It's inconsistent, it's independent. Question about that? Don't try to look for a pattern between the two words. They're completely unrelated. Okay, it's like, are you a boy or a girl? Are you in Pennsylvania or Ohio? Okay, you can't try to be like, well, if I'm a boy, I've got to be in Pennsylvania. No, that's stupid. Okay, they have nothing to do with each other, just like those two things have nothing to do with each other. Independent can be either thing. Dependent can be either thing. I can partner these up to get any pairings I want to get, so don't try to look for pattern. There is no pattern. Looking for pattern is hopeless. Question about that first one? So let's go again. Again, the key is going to get the equations to be y equals. So 4y sits equals 2 sits minus x. Y equals half negative 1/4 x. Anything about that? So here, who am I not going to touch at first? Negative y. 1, those sit, but we need to go minus 2x. So y would equal minus 1 plus 2x. And then we've got two decisions to make. Again, this is the easier one. Independent, because those are different. They're way different. There's nothing the same. Those have nothing to do with each other. Consistent, because these are not parallel. Okay, they have different slopes. Those would absolutely touch each other. That's going to be a consistent system. This would be one like we've been doing all chapter. Consistent, independent, it's just going to work. But again, emphasizing These were the same in this category, they're different in that category. There is no link between the categories. There's no magic bullet to try to shortcut these. Question about that? So let's go again. Negative 2y equals 1 sits. Minus 3x. So y completely alone. Negative half plus 3 over 2x. Everybody there, troubles? This one, leave the 4y, leave the equals, leave the negative 2, plus 6x, y equals, negative a half, 3 over 2, once you reduce 6 over 4x. So I'd probably make the dependent-independent decision always first. It's dependent because those two things are the same. But it's consistent because they're not parallel. They do have the same slopes, which makes you think maybe parallel, but they have to also have, they have the same intercepts and you're not supposed to do that. These two lines, if we graph them, since they're a match, they'd stack. And it has not just one solution, it has infinite solutions. So that's our first dependent of the day, but that is consistent. Question about this bit of light. Slide to the left. I'm not breaking up dance moves though, even though I said slide to the left. It's not happening.
Yep.
So for these, we have a different amount of equations than we do variables, so that's just weird. Something's going to be weird if the count of variables is 2 and the count of equations is 3. Something goofy happened. I already got these y equals for you. So somebody weigh in, do you think dependent or do you think independent? I'm going to say dependent. Why am I going to say dependent?
Because they're not all different.
They're not all different, okay? 2 of these are the same. So if any 2 of them match, that would make this system be dependent. Consistent or inconsistent?
Consistent?
Inconsistent. Why would it be inconsistent?
These two of them don't.
These 2 are going to be
Parallel.
parallel. So if 2 of them are parallel, then the other one stacks. Is there anywhere they're all going to touch?
No.
No. So that's inconsistent because we're never going to have them all touch. Dependent because 2 of them did stack. I only did that example to just prove to everybody I did every combo now. I did a dependent with both options. I did an independent with both options. This is the hardest one to create. It's hard to create one that's dependent and inconsistent at the same time. That's like the weirdest of the weird. Question about that. So then we shift gears, okay? If it's an XYZ system, you're gonna have to just try to solve like you were doing the take-homes. So if we try to solve this like we were doing the take-homes and doing page 174, how did those systems, how did we start? What did we do? We'd circle something usually, and then we'd use one of the X's to get rid of all the other X's. So if you want to keep writing out all those steps, that's fine. I'm going to do this a little bit more mental math today just because we've seen a few of those. If you can't handle it, then I'll write more work if you need me to. But if I'm going to use this X to get rid of this X, if I use this X to get rid of this X, what am I going to need to multiply this by? Negative 2. So if I multiply by negative 2, that gets eliminated. If I multiply by negative 2, it changes this. What's that going to make? A negative 1y. I multiply by negative 2 and add it to an empty space. Negative 2z. If I multiply by negative 2 and add to this,
0.
I get a 0. So if I use negative 2 on that top row to attack the middle row, that's my creation. If that was too much mental math, I can write it out in the 2 levels like I used to, or anybody puzzled by which went down there. And then how would I use the x to attack the 3x?
Multiply by -3.
Multiply by -3. So if I multiply by -3 and attack this, the x's would cancel out. The y's would cancel out. The z's, I'd get -2z. And the numbers
-1.
would get a -1. And I'm wondering if I copied something wrong. I wasn't expecting that to happen. I mean, let's answer this because we're here, but I didn't mean to do that. Could we continue to solve this and get answers? Yeah. Z would be a half. If we had the Z, could we get the Y? Sure. We don't care what it is today. If we had the Z and the Y, could we go here and get the X? Sure, no problem. So since we could solve it, you don't have to solve it, you just have to recognize I could definitely solve this. That makes it consistent. And since these are different,
Independent.
that's independent. I didn't mean to do an example like that because we just have done like 20 problems like that. Okay, everything we've done has been consistent and independent up till now. I just made a mistake when I copied my notes and missed it by a number. Question about what happened there? Can you wait like 2 more problems? What I meant to have is a 2 there. Let me double check, and this should change my vote. Okay, so if I had a 2 there and I multiplied by -2, what would this be?
-4.
Once I added it to this.
Oh.
So multiply by -2, add down.
-3.
-3 is what I hope to have. If I multiply by -3s and add down,
-3.
that's a -3. That's what I meant to have happen. So are those the same? No, not exactly. So that is independent because they are different at least a little bit. Okay. If we tried to solve this, you could either notice something now or you could try to go another step.
The same thing equals different.
The same thing equals different things. This stuff equals 0 on one hand, and that stuff equals -1 on the other hand. Does that seem right? No.
Is it
Okay.
inconsistent?
That is going to be an inconsistent system. If you check the notes over there, I wrote a word, nonsense. I would consider that nonsense. This can't equal 0, while at the same time that equals -1. The transitive property, for people that have been through geometry, you saw a lot of transitive properties. If this equals 0 and this equals -1, the only way that can be true is if 0 is equal to -1. That's nonsense. Okay? If you did try to solve this another level, your take-home experience kind of math is use this to get rid of this. So if you wanted to use this to get rid of this, you would have to change all of the signs. So the y's would wipe out, the z's would wipe out. So 0 would equal 1 or -1, depending on the signs you change. I would consider that also in the category of that's nonsense. Okay? If you solve that another level, 0 equaling -1 is crazy time. Inconsistent means like crazy time nonsense, can't do it. Question about that world? So let's slide here. For this to bump off this, what magic number do we need inserted? -2. So -2 bumps off the x's. What would happen to your y's after we multiply -2 and we put them together? -1 what? Z count? 2z. Multiply by -2, add down? -2. Question about level 1? Then forget -2. What's going to bump off this? -4. So -4 crushes that. Y count? -1. Z count? 2. Number count?
-2.
-2. And I would think most people at that level would notice that those are
Completely the same.
completely the same. So what's the word of the day for completely the sameness?
Independent.
Which word? Dependent. We go dependent when you get some that are completely the same equation twice. It's not solvable in the way that you usually have solved, but yes, this is consistent. Could you pick some numbers here that worked? Like, could you randomly pick some YZ combinations that make -2?
Yeah.
Yeah, infinitely you could. Y could be 2 while Z is 0. That would do it. Or Z could be -1 while X is, or while Y is 0. We could sit here all day and pick combinations that could work out for that level. And once you did, other levels would be solvable for X. It could be done. So that is consistent.
Good catch, guys.
So,
How would the stretch like that hit the camera?
That's a good catch.
So I heard him catch something. I don't know if he caught me in something or if he caught himself in something. That's all about it. Question about that one? Somebody maybe wake her up. There you go. Hello. Welcome back to the land of the living. If we're going to use this X to get rid of this X, what do we think about that?
-2.
-2. So -2 crushes that. What would happen here? Crushes it. Crushes it. So we got 0. -2. So I think we could safely classify that as nonsense. Okay, we still have another level to go, but that's crazy. 0 can't equal -2.
Inconsistent.
That is inconsistent. Then let's use the X to bump the 3. We need -3. So X's are crushed, 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 crushed. 0 equals 0.
You know what, we're gonna go with gander, we're gonna go with dependent.
Because we haven't used that note yet, but it's been waiting for us. If you ever get a 0 equals 0 moment, that is dependent. That's true. 0 is equal 0. It's not really helpful. Perhaps people even at this level might be able to notice those two are really the same. Why are these two really the same?
It's just multiplied by.
It's just multiplied by 3. A couple days ago I told you if you saw a bigger equation like this, what could you do to shrink it? Just divide it all by the same number. If you took all of these and divided them all by 3, that other one would reveal itself. These two are really the same. The one's a multiple of the other, but those are really the same. But if you don't notice that at the beginner level, and you work and work, and you end up 0 equals 0, 0 equals 0 is a dependent. Maybe I'll throw another note here. If you got something like 0 equals 1, or 3 equals 11, just that classifies to me as nonsense, but 0 equals 0, that's not nonsense, that's true. It's not helpful, but it's true. 0 equals -2, that's nonsense. Okay, so nonsense is inconsistent. Sameness, or 0 equals 0, that's dependent. But that's like the work of the day. So bottom line, XY stuff, get the Y alone, make a choice. XYZ stuff, you have to start the take home and do like round 1. If you do round 1 of the take home, those words should reveal themselves to you and what you're doing. Homework off of this is 1 to 18. The first, and they do this in a slightly different way than what I did. The 1 to 9, they only want you to make the consistent versus inconsistent choice. That's all you have to do. 10 to 18, they have you make the dependent versus independent choice. That's all you have to do. When we do the quiz, I'll just have you do them both at once, because my feeling is if you had to do the work anyway, why not just answer both questions at the same time while you're there? I'll also advertise on the quiz, you would need to say why, okay? Otherwise, my experience as an early young teacher was people just 50-50 guessed and hoped, okay, and didn't necessarily know what the heck they were doing. So what you would say would be something like, this is inconsistent, because 0 equals -2 is nonsense. Or this is dependent because 0 equals 0 on my notes tells me so. Or this is dependent because I saw it coming from the beginning. You just took that top equation, multiplied by 3, and made the bottom equation. Those are the same, so that's dependent. You need a what it is and then a follow-up as to why. You know, this is dependent because these are the same, and I can see your work, that I can see that those are the same. This one, okay, I could also show you by looking, if you're like a number sensor crazy person, at the beginning of this, 2 of these plus 1 of those makes this. That's how I created this question. I did that level, and then I'm like, okay, let me somehow just make a new one that's really the same. I did 2 of these plus 1 of these makes this consistently all the way through. If you can see crazy stuff like that coming, you can say dependent, I saw what you did. 2 of these plus 1 of those makes the third one. I'm not gonna do the work of like solving it, I see what you're up to. If you see what I'm up to, that's fine. This, I could say pretty quickly inconsistent. This plus this makes this. This plus this makes this. This plus this makes this. For this to be consistent, 1 plus 2 would have to make 3. And I didn't. I broke that rule. That's how I created that inconsistent, is this plus this, and I made it inconsistent by like messing around. If you can see that stuff, that's fine. If you want a safe play, do round 1 and look at it. But the quiz will ask you for what it is, but also like, why did that happen? Homework life, let's look, 177, we got like 12 minutes, so I can assist you with this 177 if anybody needs assistance. We could either go public on the board, or if there's no public on the boards, I could just visit and do individual helps if that's more of a help. Anybody 177 need any public? Let's do this on the board and help everybody, kind of things that you just weren't able to do. I'm not going to read answers, they're odds, they're all in the back, that'd be dumb for me to do that. Anybody need any help? So we'll wrap up the record.